Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball
with Eir Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. Visit airsport.ie.
You're very welcome along. It's Wednesday night rugby. We have Matt Williams with us and Keith Wood with us. Hello, gentlemen. You're there?
Good afternoon. Good evening.
Very good. Matty, how you doing?
Very good, Joe. Very good, mate. Sitting in southern France listening to your dulcet tones.
Oh, what's the temperature in the south of France right now?
Mate, it's a beautiful time of year. It's getting up to about 26, 27 during the day and drops down to about 10 overnight. So, absolutely beautiful time of year. Change of season. Lovely.
Lovely.
It's too hot for me, I have to say.
It's summer down your way, Killaloe, isn't it, Woody? 26?
26 would be. It's still too hot for me. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm in southern Killaloe at the moment, but never mind.
Always sunny in Killaloe.
Yes.
So Leinster and Munster came through their respective games at the weekend in very different fashion. We saw Munster rack up a thoroughly routine, convincing trouncing of Ulster, who had 14 injuries coming into that game at Thomond Park, and then Leinster behind against Connacht until half-time, really, Matty. And in the grand tradition of Irish rugby, Leinster don't love going down to Galway, and Connacht sure love having them down there.
They do, and you could sort of see the Leinster players almost glancing at their watches. When can we get on the bus and get out of here? They were very inaccurate in that first 40 minutes. Much of it, to be fair, to the excellent pressure that Connacht put on them. Connacht love having them there and play out of their skin, as they do every time they play their bigger brothers. But it sort of took the individual brilliance of Gary Ringrose and some magnificent footwork just to put Connacht back on their heels, and really from that minute on, Leinster looked pretty much in control. They didn't look out of control, but they certainly didn't look or have the accuracy that they normally do. They were dropping passes here and there and a little bit off, but from that point on, they looked pretty good from then on, even if not perfect. And again, they wanted to get a job done. Picked a good side. Probably wanted to make a bit of a statement to Connacht and to everyone else, and get on the bus and get home, and the job done. But it wasn't pretty. And usually those fixtures, Leinster-Connacht, are rarely joyous games of that we would celebrate in rugby. They're tough and they're frustrating for the big club, and they're inspiring for the perceived smaller club, but it's a job done for Leinster.
Yeah, ultimately it was comfortable, 20 points to 3, the final score. And the Gary Ringrose try, Keith, was kind of the moment where you felt, OK, Leinster are going to get this done fairly comfortably, or certainly one way or another. I mean, the Ringrose try, it was just such a classy touch from Ringrose the whole way through.
Yeah, I love that. I love it when you see somebody do something totally different. That isn't in any playbook.
Yeah.
That's off the cuff. It's, where's the space? No, it's not here. No, it's not. Actually, it is all the way over here. And from a defensive perspective, what you would say is that Connacht have to come up on both sides of the ruck and come up even. And some of the bigger forwards just drifted across the field and didn't come up, and that's where Ringrose found the gap. It's proper rugby too. There was a mistake made by the defence, and he exploited it. I think he runs incredibly similar to Brian O'Driscoll, and I know that I, for one, was very keen that they wouldn't have those similarities, because I think it's a pretty hefty thing to kind of carry with you when you're a young fella. But he's getting older. That is something that Rico would have done and would have had the skills to do. So he was able to step off both feet in the midst of that, and he was doing it all at fairly high pace. So there was a mistake, but it was great play to get the score. Yeah,
because actually, Matt, during the Six Nations in particular, Ringrose's game was talked about so much with a view to him coming back and shoring up the defence, because he's such a great reader of opposition attack. But I mean, when he throws in moments like that, you kind of have to say, well, hang on. That's almost the most special thing he can do, the way he can pick a gap like that. And as Keith says, I mean, his body shape, the angle, it's all very Brian O'Driscoll-esque.
Yeah, he's a specialist outside centre, Joe. We've had discussions on this before, the huge difference in what a 12 does and what a 13 does to a lot of people is lost. And they're just such different positions when it comes to defending, but also attacking. He actually reminds me of someone Keith would remember, which is Jason Little, who, along with Tim Horan, probably made one of the greatest centre pairings in the world. Well, probably the best centre pairing before Brian and Gordon Darcy. Probably maybe one or two of the Kiwis might be up there. But Jason was this tall, athletic, lithe, lightning fast athlete that had wonderful feet, was a great defender, but could do things just like Gary does. And Gary's footwork and pace and his ability to make that outside break and change direction makes him a really good outside centre. And we could see when Robbie Henshaw plays 13, he's such a good athlete, he does a job for you, but he's made for 12. And you're just seeing a guy that's made for that role play so well. And exactly what Keith said, so much what a 13 does, it's the angle he gets before he gets the ball, which is something Brian did brilliantly, and Ringrose is learning to do that. If they want to run to the right before they get the ball, they're running to the left, then they change angle and vice versa. They want to run in, they're running out. They do the opposite. They move their man around, which is something that Ringrose does in attack really well. And even though he wasn't playing with Henshaw, I think when he and Henshaw come together, it's one of the best centre pairings in the world because they just complement each other so much, and I really like watching Ringrose play. I think he's just a beautiful rugby player with the ball or without the ball. He's a really good player to watch.
Keith, it was a good chance for everybody to see what Andy Friend is about against top class opposition. So what are they bringing to the party? What are Connacht trying to do this year now that they've had a few weeks together?
Well, I thought they brought a high level of discipline. They haven't they've been close and not close enough, which they went through a period of that with Pat Lam at the start. This was a better performance against Leinster, who I think they're just such a large amount further ahead of all the other teams. I think it's a really good marker for them, and I thought they were in the game. I thought they didn't show as much as they'd like to do, though they did have a right cut a couple of times, which means they have the capacity to do that. I think they haven't forgotten anything from Pat Lam, and I now think they've got the confidence again to go and play like that. I don't know him. I haven't seen a huge amount about him. They've lost a couple of matches, but they don't seem downbeat about it. Now, I'm not saying that they're dismissing it. I think they seem to have found a bit of joy again. They didn't have that last year. And, people criticise the fact that Keane got sacked so quickly, but it obviously wasn't a happy place for anybody there.
No, I don't think you sack your coach that quickly without consulting with the players. I mean, we can presume that. And you don't want it all in that one way either, that the players are ultimately responsible for it. I just before we move on a little bit, the last bit I wanted to say about Gary Ringrose is slightly philosophical conversation. Are we kind of moving back a little bit to being the game for people of all shapes and sizes? Because he is a guy that has that build of a 13, and you mentioned Little, but that athletic 13 who can do some damage. And have we kind of had to chop and change a lot over the last number of years as the laws of the game keep changing? So we end up with this generic player. But if you look at New Zealand, they all seem to be getting lighter again. There's guys that can do different skills. I would agree. I think he's an out-and-out 13. Yeah, I met him a couple of weeks ago. He's big. He's I'd say 6'2" or 6'3", and he's plenty wide as well. Like, he's no shrinking violet. He's bigger than Dricko.
No, but he's not
crash ball.
He's not 17 and a half stone.
No, he's not that.
So and I look, for me, why I liked the game the other day was because things happened off the cuff, and they should. You just want to have that bit. Yes, of course you want a game plan, but you need to have a little bit of wriggle room so you can do something totally different. And we saw some of that in the Munster game as well.
There was an interesting one I saw after the game. Hugh Hogan. I don't know if you've come across Hugh Hogan before. I'm sure maybe you have, one way or another. He's Leinster's contact skills coach. So he'd been there before in various other roles, and now he's very much focusing on what they do in contact. And Hugh Hogan, Josh van der Fly are talking about him. He's been working with us a lot. So at the start of the season especially, we were soaking tackles, giving them yards, but now we're just trying to get more impact and a better hit in the tackle. Sounds very simple, doesn't always happen, but it's something we've been really focusing on. And Hugh Hogan is working with the players on what they do individually in contact, making tackles. it is one, a sign of the times, Matt, and two, a sign of the resources that Leinster have and the innovation that's going on over there?
I think if you take your second point first, you've got to have the money to have specialist coaches. I think both Leo and Felipe would have been brought up, were definitely brought up as players on Leinster on post-contact work because they were coached and had the influence of Willie Anderson, who is one of the greatest coaches of post-contact work that I've ever seen. And I know Leo from watching them train and warm up before the game. They do lots of work on how they keep the ball alive, and that the principles of that don't change. Which is the first one is when you come to contact, whether you have the ball or you don't have the ball, take 3 steps on contact post. So you get to post contact, and Leinster are exceptionally good at what happens 1 or 2 seconds, or maybe that's a bit too much, maybe a half a second to 1.5 seconds after they make contact. They are looking to either offload when they have the ball or to get a really good long place that allows you to get fast ball. And in defence, they're doing the opposite. They're trying to slow that ball down by driving you sideways or at best backwards. So you can't do that. I don't know Hugh personally, but I from watching the team, as I said, not just in games, but in what they do outside of the games in their warm-up, it's a very, very high priority with them, as it should be with all teams, because that creates exactly what Woody's talking about. That creates play that is unplanned, that is just heads up, where do we go, what do we do? And that, because it breaks the defensive line. And once you can get away from that structured defensive line, that's when being a rugby player and just playing what's in front of you comes so naturally, and it's so joyous to play and to watch. It's a real bonus, and I think it's something that I always encourage junior teams to embrace. It's just some basic skills. New Zealanders are doing this, and that comes from footwork before contact.
Yes,
how good that is, which the New Zealanders have gone back to. So much of what we just spoken about, the New Zealanders have gone back to doing 3 and 4 years ago. And it's not new, it's old, but it doesn't matter. Don't say old school or new school. It's correct. It's perfect.
All ties in with the comfortable and chaos ethos that Stuart Lancaster's brought to the setup. We will read your comments. Get them in, by the way. We're streaming at the moment on Facebook as well, all with thanks to Heineken. We'll give away prizes for the best comment. Last week we gave away tickets for Leinster Wasps, which kicks off the Champions Cup. This week we're upping it one better. You'll get VIP tickets to that game as well, which includes a stadium tour. So be sure to get your comments in. And I suppose we're talking about Connacht against Leinster in the context of Leinster against Munster this Saturday at 6 o'clock, and Ulster host Connacht on Friday at 7:35. Keith, Munster ran in 9 tries against Ulster, and it continues this trend, I suppose. And we've talked about it for a month, so we probably don't want to get too into it again, but this trend of home form pretty good for Munster, opposition not very good. Ulster came with 14 injuries, not putting up much of a challenge, and therefore kind of a reticence about drawing any hard and firm conclusions. And that's kind of where we are. That's where Munster are as they head into Leinster this weekend and into the Champions Cup. Yeah,
I think you draw a sort of mean line through all the performances and say, yeah, that's okay. So last week was fantastic. The week before was pretty poor at the end in the second half. Which one do you get excited by? I would have been excited by there was a higher level of attention to detail at the weekend. There was a far better line speed, both in attack and defence. There was a little bit of invention too, which was nice. We saw Mathewson coming in, playing 9. He will be of unbelievable value for Munster all season, and I just think he was snappy. He ran out of gas pretty spectacularly, actually, in the second half. But he hasn't played a lot of rugby. But it was his speed at the ruck time, and he's a kind of bitchy scrum half. You can see him; he's roaring, he's shouting, he's slapping, he's kind of having a go at his own players. Forwards like that, I have to say, it's a kind of fine line, but they like it because you're not in any doubt as to what's happening and what you're expected to do at any particular period of time. And when you get up from a ruck or up from a scrum and you have to try and concentrate on something, having put a huge amount of effort in, when you have someone shouting at you to do something, you just do it. It's one of those great simple things. We're like cattle. But I just thought that looked crisp. I thought Carberry looked very sharp outside him. I thought Keith Earls looked, it just looked as if he clicked on to where he was all last season. He is a proper threat all the time and just looks like he's loving it as well. So I'm excited because of all those. Does that mean I think Munster are favourites going into the weekend? Absolutely not. Is it a step up from what Munster have done? Irrespective of how Ulster were, it absolutely is a step up. There was a bit of pace. There was some fantastic handling. And I know that Matt is saying we won't really know what the real benefit of Joey Carberry is until after Christmas. But he's a most beautiful handler of a ball. He zips the ball across the line. I can tell you ever see if a guy shovels a ball, the next guy shovels it, the next guy shovels it, and it's a knock-on. If a guy passes it perfectly, that's what you have in your head. Their next pass, you want to do the same. You're trying to hit a level of excellence all the time. I think he's had a very good start to his Munster career.
The Mathewson impact was fantastic, really. He turned into Tom Brady at one point, which showed a fair degree of bottle in your first game. He's experienced, he's played for the All Blacks 5 times, he's 33. Johan van Graan was saying with the quick throw-in, all the players around him were saying, listen, slow down, don't do it. And he said, sod this, I'm doing it anyway, which is kind of great and ties in with your point of, well, let's just play a little bit off the cuff and have a bit of enjoyment here and see what happens.
Well, I want to see that. I don't want to see all of that all the time, but I want to see. My frustrating part of Munster is at different times during the season, at different times during games, they slow down the ruck ball and it's too slow.
Okay.
And so I thought there was a stark and marked difference to the pace of the ball the other day. So, it makes it very tough for the other scrum halves in Munster. We know Conor is by far and away the number one. There is a big gap between him and the next guy, and this is a good bridging gap. And if you have a player that can come on and take some of the pressure off Conor when he eventually gets back playing, perfect. But I think he set a higher standard because none of those guys were ever going to push Conor Murray out of the number 9 slot. They just weren't. Yeah. But now there's somebody else who's just come in and he may be more attainable for them, but they're going to have to up their game.
Yeah. So just a point to raise, and again, we talked about this a lot over the last month, so we're certainly not going to dwell on this, and there's great games to talk about this weekend. But it was interesting. I was reading the Irish Times. Jerry Thornley was looking at the stats. We can sometimes scoff at the top 14, which is very much win your games at home and whatever about away we won't worry about on the road. We'll send dud teams or not go wholehearted. So the top 14 win rate at home is 75%. And thus far in the Pro 14, we're up to 81.5%. So let's call it 82% in the Pro 14. So significantly up in the top 14, 22 home wins, just 5 away wins is where we are. Eddie O'Sullivan was almost raising this point as well on Monday. Like Richard Cockrell was talking about the trip to the RDS. He left a few frontline players at home, just kind of saying, look, we probably wouldn't have won anyway, so let's target the home games. Perfectly acceptable, practical coaching, I would think. But Eddie was just saying, like, let's not get into this habit too quickly. Have a listen.
I think it's a problem for the tournament in terms of the integrity of the tournament, that we don't turn into what was the French, top 14, where basically you only won your away matches and you sent a different team on the road, and the predictability of that doesn't help the spectators who are paying their money. I mean, it's great fun when your team are racking up 60 points, but when you step back from it, it's not the competition you want. It doesn't help sponsorship. It doesn't help TV. Nobody's going to sit at home and watch one team put 60 points on another unless you've skin in the game. So it's not good for the tournament, and I'm not sure what you can do about it, because coaches have picked the teams they want and the teams they think is going to serve them best to get to what is at the end of the day trying to get into the playoffs at the end of the season. And Rory's right, probably the only team in the tournament can afford to chop and change like any other team and not pay a price is Leinster. They have that much depth and talent. but I think it does affect the integrity of the tournament, and it's probably the first year we've seen it. It kind of in essence where you can almost, the worrying thing is you go to a game, you look at the two teams in the lineup and you go, well, if they keep it under 50, it'll be interesting, and that was the way it was in Thomond Park last weekend. It was the way it was in Cork 2 weeks earlier, and it's not good for the tournament. Growing the tournament is a great idea, provided and only provided it's sustainable and meaningful. And if it's not meaningful, if you have these one-sided affairs going on right through the season, and let's not, move past the fact that there are some kind of lame ducks in the tournament. It used to be the Italian teams that are the lame ducks, but they seem to be pitching up a bit better, but they seem to have been replaced by the South African teams. Mm. So you can't afford to have a tournament where you've 2 or 3, maybe 4 lame ducks in it that everyone beats up, and then in between those other teams are resting away from home and they're getting wiped out. It's just not sustainable. So if you're going to develop the tournament, you need to develop it in terms of sustainability, because you can have more games and more teams, but if nobody's going to watch it or see it, you're just creating a bigger deficit. The perfect model is the NFL in America, where the 16 regular season games, and they believe that's too many. And if you look at the NFL last night, there was a ton of games went down to the last play practically. That's what gets people into the stadiums. It's any given Sunday, is the famous saying of the NFL, is that means any team can beat anybody else on any given Sunday. And that's what you need to generate in a tournament to make people come back every week.
There you are, Eddie O'Sullivan on Monday Night Rugby, and we're live here on Wednesday Night Rugby with Keith and with Matt, and with thanks to Eir Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. The key point there that Eddie makes, Matt, is that this is not easily fixable, and we're all talking about player welfare now, and we certainly mean it when we talk about player welfare. So you've got X number of games and X number of players, and that just doesn't quite work. He's sounding a note of caution. I suppose the worry might be that the league slips into a habit of just targeting home games predominantly. It's okay to rest players for different games, but if it becomes a home and away thing, then we really will be in trouble. That is something to watch. He feels it's more pronounced this year.
I think it's more pronounced in the north than the south, and it comes down to economics. The NFL is the perfect model. They're only playing 13 odd games in playoffs, but they're generating, billions and billions of dollars. They don't have to play more games. The problem is forced by the clubs having to play more games to generate the income to be sustainable. On top of that, you have 2 competitions. You have your domestic competition and the Champions Cup, and on top of that, you have international duty. So you're getting ideally the same group of players being targeted in 3 competitions, which would pick them up to, as Keith said, he played last week when we were chatting about this, Keith said he played 35, 36 games one season at Harlequins. Now, that's not sustainable. So if the powers that be, I think this comes down to Augustin Pichot at the recent meeting of World Rugby in Sydney, or just prior to it, was saying that the annual calendar of rugby is not sustainable. It's not for player welfare. It's only sustainable for player welfare if the players get rested. Now, the South isn't quite as bad because Super Rugby's doing the opposite. It hasn't got as many games, and so your top players play every game, and that there is a little difference in amongst that compared to the North. So it comes down to the style of your season. But it's not the coaches. This isn't the role of the coach. So if I'm sitting there, my job is to get my club into the competition. My chairman or my president, he doesn't give a rat's patootie about the big deal. He wants his club. He's putting his hard-earned in. He wants his club in the playoffs. And if I don't do that, I'm going to be out of a job. So you work out, okay, we're going to win these home games. I'm targeting these away games. Wow, I've got to win this home game. This is a big one this week because we're bringing the team that's maybe number 3 and we might get in at number 4. We've got to beat that number 3 team. So I'm going to rest everyone the week before that. That's the way it works. It's just not fair to blame coaches or players. This is a way above, the coaches or players' decision-making process. This is who sets out the calendar for the year, and the pressure that we come under from owners, especially England and France, where it is individual presidents putting money into clubs that have the power, and that they have the power that is dominating on the Celtic and Italian clubs. So it is a very, very complex situation. I don't disagree with Eddie on his summation of it. I do agree with it. You know, the Ospreys coming down to Limerick to Musgrave Park the other week. You know, -7 or -8 of their best players, their British and Irish Lions and their Welsh internationals. You know, you looked at that beforehand and you say, well, it is going to be 50 points. Poor old Ulster coming back from the playing at altitude, -14 players. Once you saw the team they put out, you went, woof, it's a tough day at the office for them. You know, that's not good for the competition, and it's not going to get people coming through the turnstile. So you're back to the economics. But it is a question of economics and planning. Yeah,
it's very difficult. Keith, if we move it on into this weekend then, as a prime example of the management decisions which have to be made, and we're looking here at Champions Cup over the next fortnight, and then we're into November, and then more Champions Cup and Six Nations around the corner. So the top guys have a really busy time coming up. For instance, Hey Jude 96 is watching. Has the Derby become less of a spectacle since 2009? And clearly, you know, it has. It's averaged 47,000 Leinster-Munster, averaged 47,000 since 2010, which is quite extraordinary. But because of the things we've been talking about, unless Johnny Sexton is going to play 6 weeks in a row, which he's not, and Joey Carberry something similar, we're going to have Leinster-Munster this Saturday without Carberry and without Sexton. And sure, it will be lovely to see Ross Byrne and, you know, emerging players get their chance. But the Leinster-Munster Pro 14 rivalry, you could say in some respects, has been sacrificed somewhat. Now, do you move it? Do you put it somewhere else? And where that is, I don't know.
Yeah, I was looking at it and listening to Eddie's comments as well. I think it's really relevant at the moment, and in the first month, I think it is the most relevant. And I think it ceases to be as much of a problem as the season goes on. And so rather than change everything for the want of what we've just seen in the last month, let's see what happens over the next period of time. For me, it was a huge thing because I feel like an old fogey, but the derbies were huge. It was a championship in itself. When I was, and they were the big games that you wanted to play when you're playing for Munster. I think it's wrong that we don't have those guys. I understand why they may not play this weekend, and I think it's very important we do look after them within this window, because they're going to go to 6 matches and then a series of international matches again then in November. We're just hitting every height, and then we're going back to European Cup again. We talk all the time about how the different competitions set. Any comparison with the NFL is a waste of time. NFL is huge money, has got one country, a fully organised setup, nothing independent. It's run and organised. People own the competition, or the clubs, but they all fit into one competition. That's it. We basically have the Cup, the League, Autumn Internationals, Six Nations, everything else in. We're never going to get it really comfortable with it. But we have to get to the situation where certain things are sacrosanct. In my view, Munster-Leinster is a game that has to be given full credence, because it's part of our history, to be honest. And they were almost like trials to play for Ireland. Now we know that has moved on, and we kind of all know who's going to be playing for Ireland, pretty much, give or take. It isn't throw them up in the air and see what way it falls, which it used to be. But I think we need these days to be really big. I don't think we lose integrity yet, but we can have this conversation and it goes bigger. It's like a bloody onion. You peel off one thing, there's another issue, then there's another, then there's another. The game fell apart by going professional, which we all loved with the idea of it. But the reason we never got full comfort with every part of it was because the RFU and the French clubs or the French Federation didn't get their act together properly and organise it. So what we end up doing is have people with very different perspectives and wanting to have different levels of control. And because of that, it's going to take a long time. I love Pichot's just sticking it out there because it's really upset as many people as possible. And actually, maybe we do need to upset a few more people to try and get something resolved, because it can't go it can't go to the level that it's going at the present moment in time. Something has to give, and at the moment, it actually is turning out to be the supporter who isn't getting to see the matchup that could be Johnny against Joey.
Which would be great. I mean, and there is such a lingering love for this fixture, Matt, that it has averaged 47,000, and we're going to have something similar turning up at the Aviva on Saturday when they know they won't see Joey versus Johnny. But there is a point where that will dwindle, and you've created this amazing thing, and then you're almost letting it filter away. And so, I don't know where you move it is the problem. I mean, if we all had an obvious week where it could go, then it'd be much easier to solve. But something sort of instinctively feels that Leinster-Munster and, Ulster-Connacht as well, but certainly Leinster-Munster, because of what it was in the last 10 years, should be protected at all costs.
Absolutely. It's changed, and this is, I think, part of the nature of how rugby in Ireland has grown and developed and moved forward so massively in the last 20 years since professionalism came in. Keith and I, my first game in assistant coach at Leinster was against Munster the night before the World Cup final in '99, and Woody played, and there was 800 people at Donnybrook to see Munster-Leinster. Now, that game has just gone into all different proportions because of this incredible rivalry that's developed over that period of time. Now, obviously, the week before the the Champions Cup starts, the coaches are deciding now by their selection that that's not the week they want to put out their best players in a massive game. So I think people need to sit down and say, well, we need to preserve the history and the rivalry and the finances, again, for both clubs, the financial success of this for both clubs. Where do we put it? Is it 2 weeks before? Will you play your best team 2 weeks before?
Yeah.
Will you play your best team? And we say, let's get our best players out. We've got to have our best players out playing in the best game. If you don't, they won't be at the Aviva for long because people will vote with their bums. They won't turn up, and that would be really sad. It'd be a great loss for Irish rugby. And Irish rugby's got a lot of things right over that 20-year period, and the vast majority right. They've got to do some thinking on this one.
And is there any sense that Joe Schmidt doesn't want too much heat in the Leinster-Munster rivalry because it may spill over into Irish duty, Keith?
I don't think he wants them killing each other, but I don't know that he can make that call in this situation. It's funny, I look at that and say there's going to be heat in it anyway. It doesn't matter a damn what Joe Schmidt says.
Yeah, sure.
You want to win the game. So are you going to tone it down a little? No. If you look at the way different players have come back at different times, you would say it isn't just about Johnny and Joey either, by the way. So you'll see, like Keith Earls will want to play. There's a lot of guys who've only come back in the last couple of weeks. They'll absolutely want to play because they need to play and they need the games to get up to speed. By whatever circumstances have been, both those guys have been in maybe a little bit sooner than they would have.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just a confluence of events.
Yeah, well, that's on 6 o'clock Saturday. We'll certainly talk about that next week. And then obviously we've got Champions Cup to preview as well. And Connacht look for the first win in Belfast since 1960. Way back to that 6-3 win. Before I let you go, we're going to follow this piece with an interview with James Ryan, who's on the way. I spoke to him earlier on this afternoon. And, you have to kind of remind yourself that his story is real, Keith. I mean, maybe a word from you on what this guy can do in the game. 22 years old, he wins the Grand Slam in his 8th cap for Ireland, Pro 14 champion, man of the match in the European Cup final, a winning test series in Australia, and now he's just turned 22. I mean, I presume, Keith, we're looking at future line, future Irish captain potentially. The world's his oyster if he keeps going the way he's going.
Yeah, I don't know as a captain because I haven't seen him be a captain, but I do know that people have been talking very highly about him. As a player, what I love is the improvements he makes. So he started learning in real time, in real Six Nations games, having to figure out exactly how do you do this because it's different. Timing is different. People go into different positions, going to get in your way. A lot of things happen and they're happening in front of 82,000 people and, 10 or 12 million watching on the telly. It's a hard place to kind of grow up. And he has grown up in excellence, which is pretty amazing. So, look, I'm looking forward to seeing what he actually becomes. And I think every time you see a new generation, he is part of a new generation. But his start is winning. So what's it going to be like? Can he pick up the information from Rob Kearney, who said that he won very early in his career and, winning the Grand Slam in 2009. And it was it almost easy. And then it took him another 10 years to do it. Now, there's only 3 in our history, so this is not something that is easy at all. But are there things that he can learn? So if he is such a sponge on the field, can he be a sponge off the field to try and learn from the experience of other players that he's playing with? Because if he can do that for the next couple of years, he can be as good as we've had.
Yeah. Matt, I haven't overhyped him there, have I?
Well, no, it's just an amazing story when you put the stats out. We kept looking at him last year during the Six Nations, and I kept turning around saying, is this kid really only 21? Is he only 21? You just can't believe it. But when you look at his face, and I mean this with respect, he's
still a baby face.
You're waiting for him to grow up, and he is not anywhere near physically at his potential. It'll be another 4 years or so till he's right at that peak.
Yeah,
it's a great story, and it also tells you something about the background at Leinster, as in their sub-academy, their schools. You don't come and play like that at 21 without having been conditioned and coached exceptionally well from 15 through. You don't turn up for 6 weeks before in training and go to the gym a couple of days a week and all of a sudden you're ready to run out and do what that young man's done. He's had many years of excellent preparation at an appropriate level for where he was as a young man, so that when his opportunity arose, he just stepped straight in. And that, to me, is as extraordinary as his own performance, is the way he was channeled through that system.
Yeah, there seems to be a glut of St Michael's players in the Leinster camp now. They're doing good things. So, gents, we'll reconvene next week. The season's really hotting up now. We've got plenty to get stuck into next week. So thanks very much for this evening.
Pleasure.
Pleasure, Joe.
Matt and Keith there. And on Friday week, which is October 12th, it all really kicks off in a big way. We have got live commentary of Leinster's Heineken Champions Cup opener against Wasps. That's at the RDS. We'll have Dave with Liam Toland and Kevin McLaughlin there. And then on Saturday, 2 live games. We've got the Connacht against Bordeaux game at the Sports Ground in the Challenge Cup. And then we'll have Munster-Gloucester at Thomond Park as well. So the weekend after this, when the Champions and Challenge Cups kick off, we'll have loads of commentary for you that weekend, and it'll continue right throughout the season. I mentioned to the lads with James Ryan. I spoke to him earlier on about, what a ridiculous rise in the game over the last year or so. So here's James Ryan. So as you can see, we're here with James Ryan. James, good to meet you. Thanks for making time for us. I know you have a busy day. It's the way life is now.
Exactly, that's the way it is, Joe. Nice to meet you too.
So season 1, Grand Slam winner on your 8th cap, I think. Pro 14 champion, man of the match in the European Cup final. Best of luck for season 2, no pressure.
Yeah.
Mad, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it was a great year last year. I loved every minute of it. So, yeah, I'm just excited now to get going again. Obviously, had a couple of games, but some of the bigger games now are coming up that will kind of define our season, so looking forward to them.
I mean, you had pedigree. You were the under-20 captain. People have been talking about you for a long time in the schools system. That said, were you a bit surprised at how seamless the transition was in your first full season? I mean, you're kind of expecting some growing pains and some really bad games out there. It didn't seem to happen, certainly looking in from the outside. How did you find it?
Yeah, it wasn't seamless for me. Maybe you kind of only really see the games on the Saturday night or the Saturday afternoons. But there's a lot. Kind of behind closed doors, and there's a lot that goes into it, and it was a big learning curve for me, and as I said, I loved it all, but certainly there was moments where I had to kind of find my feet.
Yeah. So what are the kind of things that you're struggling with in that initial season that maybe we're not seeing?
I suppose initially just the kind of the volume of detail you're required to know in terms of the number of plays and calls, and there'd be a bit of work you have to do off the pitch to make sure that you're mentally ready, and then there's just the I suppose the expectation, and when you're playing in the Six Nations games last year, the big Leinster games, there's playing on that stage, there's that added bit of pressure as well. And
how did you find that? So, I mean, getting ready mentally, I guess you talk about learning the number of plays, and we kind of that's self-explanatory, but getting ready mentally, you're 21 years old, you're suddenly playing in front of millions of people know who you are, they're talking about you, idiots on the radio are saying, how was James Ryan on a Monday after games? So how do you prepare yourself for all of that then when you talk about getting ready mentally?
Well, I like to get my detail done early in the week, so I suppose all the rugby elements of it, I'd be looking at getting done kind of by Tuesday, Wednesday. So when Thursday and Friday comes later in the week, that's when I can kind of, suppose, making sure that emotionally and physically that I'll be ready or I'm going to be hopefully ready for the game.
So is that nerves, or is it getting yourself psyched up, or what is it for you on a Thursday, Friday before a massive game Saturday?
It's not getting myself psyched up, because I think, if you're not getting psyched up to play in some of those games, then you should be really. Yeah. So it's probably more of we're keeping calm really, and kind of focusing on the process.
The old process, the trusty process. Is that like, forget about rugby on a Thursday, go and hang out with your mates kind of thing? Go and grab a coffee with someone who's not involved in rugby, or what do you like to do on a Thursday, Friday?
That's exactly it. Yeah. Whatever. The cinema with my mates was one of the trustees I go to, or just a walk with my dogs or whatever.
Just so you're not mulling it over again and again and again.
Yeah. Well, as I said, if you've got it done early in the week, then Thursday, Friday, you have that insurance of being able to relax.
So how much more detail is there then, say, under 20s? I mean, you're part of the team that beats New Zealand. I'm sure you have plenty of calls and plays then. How does that compare with what you're doing under Joe or at Leinster? There'd be a lot more detail and things you're required to know now. So whilst there was definitely a bit at that level, it does get ranked up quite a few notches. Yeah. Like, how many line-out calls would you need to be on top of across a standard test match?
Maybe you could have 30 options or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a bit.
And if you don't know option number 28 and it's called,
you won't be getting picked again.
Right. Okay. Yeah. God, it's amazing. So that is a proper lot of work to get through and be on top of and be able to call at a moment's notice. And it was Union Henderson, memory serves, at Twickenham. Yeah. Were you calling the line out in that game, or?
No, Henry was calling that game.
Have you called it much or at all?
No, I haven't. I play with Dev quite a bit, and he's so good in that area. Such a cool head in him. So I'm kind of always trying to learn from him as well. And that's an area of his game that he's really good at. So.
Yeah, the art of which line out to call and when is probably something most of us don't have a real deep appreciation for. We're just watching and the line out happens and we see where it goes. Like, when you say Dev's really good at it, is he looking at how they're set up first, or will they just react to how you're set up opposition wise if it's your ball, or is he looking at, is he talking to Captain Johnny? Like, how is he deciding what call to go with and when?
I think he's just. I've rarely seen Dev lose his cool, very rarely, and so he's somebody that is able to make decisions, in a pretty kind of calm way. If you've got a 5 meter line out, last 5 minutes of the game, and you need to try, you trust him to make a good call. So there's that element of just having that kind of calm, collected manner, and the other part of it is being able to see space. So it's pretty simple. But if the back and the middle are being marked, then you're going to have to go to the front more often than not. So
so there's an element of reacting to how they're set up too.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I presume increasingly teams are trying to get you to the front rather than give Leinster open space.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and we'd kind of be looking at doing the same. Because obviously, if a team's playing, ball off the top towards the middle of the back, it's a nice platform to play off. So, by forcing them to the front, it makes the scrum halves pass longer to the first receiver. It means we can get off the line and eat more space. It's kind of something that every team's looking at doing at the moment.
When you size up your game, where is it? What are you pretty happy with? What are the things that you want to work on this year?
I think. What I'm working at the moment is just the nuts and bolts of the game. I've been doing quite a bit of work with Foggs, John Fogarty, Leinster scrum coach, and he's just been hammering away at me about the basics. So about my scrum, about my line out. So just all the fundamentals there. So that's the set piece is definitely one area that I'm looking at,
Right.
kind of trying to make part of my DNA, I suppose.
Yeah. And do you do much with Leo on the line out, or is he kind of hands off at this stage in that territory, like on the actual training field?
No, Leo would run the line out a lot of it.
So that's a really good operator there.
Exactly. Yeah. So between himself and Dev and Scott Fardy, there's loads I've been learning.
Yeah. Do you look at statistics in terms of how you size up a game? Like, remember the Scotland game, Joe Schmidt picked you out as a really good performer. You had 15 carries, 13 tackles that day. And statistics can, of course, be very misleading as well. But what stats are you trying to hit in a given test match, for instance, in terms of carries and tackles and that whole area?
I do look at striving for, I suppose, my number of involvements being as high as I can make them. So the more tackles and carries I can make in a game, the more involved I'm going to be. So I'd be looking at I wouldn't be kind of overthinking it, but at hitting double figures in both as much as I can.
Okay. I guess there can be an element of making an unnecessary tackle or an unnecessary carry just so it looks better on Monday and it mightn't be best for the game.
Yeah, well, like sometimes you might not be as involved in a game as you'd like. 'Cause you might have to hold the width, and other guys have to make tackles, or you might have to make a smart decision. Whether or not to bite in and make a tackle. You might need to hold your space and let other guys fold or make that tackle. So it's not, as you say, it's not all kind of stats, but they're
part of it.
Yeah.
Stuart Lancaster was on the show last year, talked a lot about being comfortable in chaos. That kind of phrase has been used a lot. What does that mean to you in training? What's your role in the chaos when the ball's flying around and he's throwing different things at you?
I suppose we work a lot in our conditioning. We do a lot of running and things like that. So, a lot of our training sessions, the levels you reach, in terms of, how hard it can be. Certainly in a lot of games they wouldn't reach those levels. So, I think when you're kind of exposed to that at training, that kind of chaos, that when the games come, sometimes they can be that bit easier. Yeah. So you're used to that chaos, as you put it.
Yeah. Was it always going to be rugby for you? Like, were you 14, 15-year-old thinking, my dream and nothing else is to play professional rugby, ideally for Leinster? Were you that focused in it from an early age, or has all this come about in maybe a more unexpected way?
It was always rugby for me, to be honest. Other guys kind of play GA and football and then turned to rugby later, but for me it was rugby all my life. So that was definitely the dream for me.
Your dad played a couple of times for Leinster, didn't he?
He did, he did, and big Lansdowne man. So I played my mini rugby at Lansdowne too. Right. So
Life away from the pitch. I understand I think I read you're doing history and politics at UCD. How's that going? What year that, Ian?
Good. I'm in stage 2, so it's a 3-year course, but I'll probably do it over 4 or 5 years. Yeah. I just take a reduced workload, so the standard student would take about 6 modules a semester, so I take 3. So no, it's good, and I've a number of guys in there that kind of help me with if I need an extension for something or if I need a bit of help because I can't make a tutorial. So they're really accommodating for all that.
Yeah. Where were you? I was winning the Grand Slam. Okay. We'll allow that one. What modules are you doing at the moment?
I'm doing Modern America, the Irish experience, and international relations.
Okay. Fascinating. Enjoying it?
I am. So
so what kind of stuff in that whole area is jumping out at you at the moment as interesting or catching your eye?
I suppose the Irish experience is kind of interesting. Just learning about Irish emigration and kind of the different phases of that, and how people migrated or emigrated after the famine, and the reasons why are pretty obvious, but in other periods of history they're not as obvious. But that's all interesting, and I'm kind of trying to make as much of an effort as I can to get in. When I'm around, to kind of get into that whole. I think once you're in there and you're kind of going to the tutorials and lectures, it kind of all becomes a bit easier, and you're able to kind of know what's going on.
And if you were a normal, not international rugby playing James Ryan, and you were coming to the end of your history and politics degree, what would you be doing? Where would you be going in life, do you think?
I I think I'd probably be looking at doing a master's.
Right.
And then from there, geez, maybe some office job.
So thank God, says you.
Yeah.
And the politics, I was reading you did a really interesting piece with Brendan O'Brien. Your grandfather.
Great-grandfather, yeah. Well,
Great-grandfather.
my grandfather was a politician. Sorry, I don't know which one you're...
I was talking about the great-grandfather,
Okay.
sorry. So he was in the GPO in 1916, founding member of Fianna Fáil, part of a Minister for Agriculture in the government as well. Like, amazing career and times, really. I guess that maybe sparked a bit of the interest in history and politics.
It definitely sparked a bit of an interest. I think I was always naturally interested, but I think when I learned about that from a younger age, it did kind of get me thinking and get me delving into my family's past a bit more, and then kind of from learning about that, the interest kind of sparks a bit.
Yeah. And is politics something you'd consider in 20 years' time?
No, probably not. To be honest, not right now. I do like it to a certain extent, but it'd be more history that I'd be have a bigger interest in.
Yeah. In broad terms then, so you're doing your studies and you're getting to grips with professional rugby. Have you had to, you and your family, I suppose, have to kind of pinch yourself a little bit at what's happened to your life in the last 18 months? It's a big thing to get your head around. Millions of people know who you are. And it's just gone so bloody well, frankly. Do you find yourself at private moments thinking, I can't believe this is happening? Or have you kind of got used to the idea pretty quickly?
No, I think my family and my mates would keep me pretty grounded.
Okay. Mates are good for that.
Yeah, they are. So, there's certainly moments where I reflect on, maybe last year. It's a new season now and a new year, but there was moments last year where I kind of reflected and had to pinch myself a bit. Yeah, just I suppose being involved in two great sides last year.
And frankly, probably hero is a strong word, but certainly players that you're watching on the TV as a teenager, and they're close to hero status, slightly surreal to be in a dressing room with them.
It was surreal. Yeah, it was. You're looking at, I suppose Johnny is the ultimate one. So playing with him is always an unbelievable experience, and when I had that kind of first taste of it, it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your big memory from the Six Nations?
Probably two, really. I think my first Six Nations game in the Stade de France was definitely one that I loved. Yeah, it was just definitely a step up from what I'd.
Right.
I mean, I played in November and all that, but it was this was a Six Nations game in the Stade de France, and I suppose everything about it, the occasion, the noise.
The speed of it, was it up a notch?
Probably not, but they're pretty physical. But just I think the occasion as a whole was one that I remember.
And were you part of that pile up at the end? I don't know where you were on the pitch that stage.
No, I was in the stand, unfortunately. Just rushing to get down.
And the other memory?
Twickenham.
Right.
Yeah, Twickenham, the Grand Slam. That was another class one. And I suppose being able to kind of share that moment with family and friends and things like that was class.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess the nature of your sport is, delayed gratification and all that. You've got to just forget about the most amazing year of your life, park it, and stay very hungry for the future. Have you set yourself targets, things you want to do, Lions tours in the future, more Six Nations, World Cup, or how do you operate? How do you motivate yourself?
No, I haven't. We're not looking too far ahead. I know that's the boring answer, but we've got Munster and Aviva this Saturday, and they're expecting 50,000 on it, hopefully. So it's a massive game, and then you got a 6-day turnaround to Wasp and the ODS.
Yeah, and then November comes around, and then more Champions Cup and Six Nations,
exactly.
And you probably don't have time to breathe.
So much rugby to be played.
Yeah, I guess the last point then, you're doing the return to play protocols for the Munster game. I think you're back.
Yeah.
It was kind of a terrible thing to read the Dominic Ryan story a couple of weeks ago in the Irish Times. I don't know if you saw it. Does that play in your mind at all at the start of your career when you see stuff like that happening and you're going through the head injury assessment yourself? It's a more physical game year on year on year. Is that something you think about at this stage of your life, or probably still feeling slightly invincible in some respects?
Not really. I think we're looked after very well at Leinster, and I think the game, in terms of the head injuries, has come on a lot, even in the last 5, 6, 7 years. So I think everybody's in a much better place now with the kind of return to play protocols and how that's all operated than players might have been. And the the medical staff in Leinster are really on the ball with it when it comes to all that. So no, it's definitely something that you wouldn't be worried about when you're dealing with them.
Yeah. And what is the protocol for returning to play? So what have you gone through over the last 2-3 weeks to get the all clear?
So there'll be a day or two of complete rest. Then there'd be a day of kind of a moderate cycle. If you pass through that symptom free, you can run. Right. If you pass through that symptom free, you can do gym work, and then you can start non-contact training, and then into kind of training. And then if you do have symptoms during any of those stages, then you have to wait till you're able to do that stage, and then once you're symptom free, you can move on. Okay. So you're coming back playing and training, when you're feeling yourself again, which is the important thing.
Okay, good. Listen, an amazingly busy few weeks coming up. Best of luck for the season. Cheers.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Joe.
Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball.
With Eir Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. Visit airsport.ie.